Hello everyone, and thank you for watching my 248 video tutorial. In the previous lecture I have promised that we will add some delays between moves in our game to make the game look more dynamic, but I wanted to warn you that this is actually the hardest part of this course, so instead of jumping right into creating code that will implement these delays, I decided to show you a little example in this lecture, and these two lectures that will be dedicated to adding delays to our game. I decided to make them in the style of a code review, so I will show you the code that I have created and just tell you how it works instead of typing the whole code on the fly and talking about it. So in this lecture I have created this scene that I have called Coroutine Test Scene, and I have put it in the folder Test Scenes. Currently there is actually nothing in our scene except for the main camera, but I have created this little script that is called Coroutine Test and attached it to our main camera. I will go to MonoDevelop and show you how this script looks right now. So it is a really simple script, and right in the start method it is making a couple of things. So first it is calling this method the method that I have created, and we will discuss it in a second, and then it is calling these two weird functions that are called start coroutine, and it seems like here in parentheses we also have a method call. But for now let's leave these calls to coroutines alone, so I will just comment these two lines. So no coroutines for now, and we will discuss them later. So this is a simple method, it is private, it is void, and it's called the method. And the contents of this method is very simple. We are creating an integer variable, then we are saying while this integer variable is less than 10, and here we are writing debug log method says, plus each step of this loop we are outputting this value of I and converting it to string, and here in the end we add 1 to our value of I so that we don't get an infinite loop. And if we create an infinite loop in Unity, so if I didn't put this line I++ in our code, then when we will launch our game Unity will crash, and the only way to get rid of Unity would be to press Ctrl-Alt-Delete and then shut it down manually, and we don't want that. So this is a very simple method, and we are calling it in our start function. And now I can go to Unity and test it. So I'll go to File and hit Save and go to our test scene, and we are interested in what we'll see in our console. So I will go to Console, and when I run the game we can see that all these messages are displayed in our console, but they are displayed momentarily. So it says method says 0, method says 1, but it was all done in a fraction of a second. So if we run our method, all these messages, they get displayed at once. But what if you would like to insert delays between these messages? So just by calling a method we cannot do this, because when we are calling a method with a while loop, all the actions in a while loop, they actually happen momentarily. So we'll have to find some other means of doing this. And one of the tools that we can use for this is called a coroutine. So I will exit play mode and go back to our coroutine test script, and I can scroll down a little bit, and as you can see we have these two other functions, and the first one is called the coroutine, and it is returning this weird type called IEnumerator. The code inside of this method seems to be even more weird. We are saying while true, that seems to be already an infinite loop. So this while true loop, it will last forever and we cannot change that. And then we are just outputting this short statement that says coroutine says something plus coroutine counter toString, and a coroutine counter is just a variable that we have declared here in our class. So it is an integer coroutine counter, and we initialize it with the value of 0. So when we first enter this while loop, it will output coroutine says 0, then we increment coroutine counter, so we add 1 to the coroutine counter, and in the next iteration of this loop it will say coroutine counter says 1, and so on. But we also have this interesting line that says yield return new wait for seconds. So coroutines are these interesting methods that will be called in a separate thread, and in this separate thread we can do a lot of cool stuff. So what this method will do is it will display this message each second. So wait for seconds, and here this 1f, it is a float variable, so it actually equals to just 1. So let's go, and without any further discussion, let's try to run our coroutine. So I will uncomment our method start coroutine. And also I wanted to say that there is this syntax that we have to use when we launch our coroutines, so we cannot just say the coroutine and call it like a method. We have to say start coroutine, and there are two ways of calling them. So first one is we can write the call to the method inside of these parentheses of our start coroutine method, and another way is to say start coroutine, and here in this parentheses I can write the name of our method as a string, so I can say run coroutine that is called the coroutine, and this line will be absolutely identical to the line on the top, so I will comment that and we will use just this call in our program. So right now I'll go to File and hit Save, and when I go to Unity I will clear the console by pressing this button here in the console, and I will launch the game. And now we can see that this coroutine displays our messages with this little delays. So it says coroutine says 7, 8, 9, and it's displaying these messages each second. So we'll stop the execution of our coroutine, and this is already much better. So if we want to introduce delays to our code, we can do this using coroutines like this. So we can create a while loop, and here in this while loop we can write yield return new wait for seconds, and what this line of code will do is it will make our method wait for 1 second and then return to its execution just as an ordinary method. And another thing that I'd like to say is, because we have written here this while true statement, this coroutine will last forever. So with the method we cannot do something like this because we cannot have an infinite while loop. But with coroutines it is very much possible because they are run in a separate thread. So if we are running a coroutine like this in our game, this means that every frame or every 1 second for the whole time of our game it will do something repeatedly. For example, this one will display a message to our console. And there is another coroutine that I have included. It is called the observing coroutine. And why this coroutine is called this way? Because it is going to observe the changes in our value coroutine counter, and while the value of our coroutine counter is less than 10, it will just do nothing. So it will say yield return null, but once our coroutine counter becomes 10 or greater, we will exit this while loop, and after that we will just display this statement debug log. The observing coroutine says that the counter is 10. Woohoo! It is not exactly correct, so maybe it is 10 or greater. Let's correct that. Alright, so now I'm going to go to our start method, and here I'm going to call our first coroutine because this is the coroutine that's going to change our coroutine counter value. And I'm also going to call this observing coroutine. So I'll go to File, hit Save, and we'll go to Unity and launch the game to see how it looks. First I will clear this console so that we get a new fresh output. And I will hit play. And we can see that our first coroutine starts saying these numbers. So it says 0, says 5, 6, 7, and once we get to 10, let's see what happens. So I will pause this, and we can see that once we get to 9, then we are incrementing and getting 10 in the first coroutine, and our second coroutine says, the observing coroutine says that the counter is 10 or greater. Woohoo! So there are a couple of statements that I wanted to get across in this lecture, and I will stop our game and I will go to our coroutine test script. In this script we have shown that we can use coroutine in a couple of ways, and in our 2 for 8 game we will use this type of a coroutine, like our coroutine that's named the coroutine, to introduce delays to our code by using this construction yield return new wait for seconds. And we will also use another type of coroutine that is called here the observer coroutine. So by using this type of statement, while something hasn't happened, yield return null, we can wait for some event to occur, and then after it occurs we can just return to our normal code execution and display a message or do anything else. So these are the 2 types of coroutines that we will use in our game.